I'm thinking we might have, well, we might have to take 2 days to do this. We'll see how far we get, okay? All right, so we do have some funny, I have to start with a funny video. Let me put this on. This just makes me laugh. Okay.
Alan! 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 Al! Alan!
She's all neck and legs. Look at her.
Oh, I am looking at her.
Stop looking at her.
You just told me to look at her.
Ow!
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 Ow! That's right at me throat, that. John, I don't think we're allowed to wee here.
It's fine, just keep a lookout. What was that? That was me zip.
Whoa! Where did all these come from? You know me, lads, I can't wee with an audience. Alan! 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 Alan!
Bear Grylls? Bear Grylls? What kind of a name's that? Are you an animal or a bit of an oven? I bet you went to private school, didn't you? With your mates Badger Hobbs and Gas Stove Squirrel.
At the Copacabana, music and fashion is always the passion at the Copa. Hey, are you filming me in the bath? Get out! Away, man, I'm naked. You better not put it on YouTube.
Oh, so that's not Alan. Steve, that's Steve.
Steve! 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 Steve!
All right, so when we're studying animal behavior, we do need to be careful that we don't put human emotions to it like we just did in that video. And when we're studying it, we always have to try to think, how does this behavior benefit an individual's survival and reproductive success? Because if an animal is doing something, and no matter how bizarre it might seem to us, it most likely is doing that behavior because it leads to its evolutionary success, especially, of course, if we see it in all of the species, not just a single individual. If it's just a single individual, maybe we just got an oddball, right? So let's jump in and let's take a look. Behavioral ecology, again, is the study of the behavior. And when we're studying it, we want to know, how is it controlled? How does it develop? How does it evolve? And how does it contribute to the reproductive success of the organism and its survival? So remember, natural selection is going to favor behaviors that increase its survival and reproductive success. So in the video, you saw the giraffes kind of hitting each other with their heads. So giraffes can be pretty violent, especially if they're trying to mate with them, if they're fighting over mating or other resources. Okay, so they could be aggressive to one another for that reason. They need to kind of make sure that they're ensuring enough resources for themselves. The scientific study, again, is going to be divided into two questions. What is the proximate reason of why that behavior is happening? Proximate is the how. Okay, so this is there some kind of environmental stimulus that triggers the behavior? Is there a genetic or physiological or anatomical mechanism underlining the behavior? Remember, genetic is genes, right? So is this a genetically programmed behavior? Physiological means your physiology is your chemical reactions in your body. And anatomical are your body structures, your parts. And then the ultimate reason, this has to do with evolution. Why are they doing this behavior, right? So when we're trying to determine animal behavior, we look at the proximate reasons and the ultimate reasons. So let's look at some examples. And if you're interested in this, you could major in animal behavior, which you would study ethology. All right, so we have here innate behavior. Innate behavior is a behavior that is going to be developmentally fixed. So that means that it cannot be changed, okay? It's occurs during our development. And it is also inherited or genetically influenced, okay? So there are certain behaviors, even that we do, like reflexes, that are innate, okay? They're genetically programmed. This is one example of one of the innate behaviors. It's called a fixed action pattern. You don't have to know any specific types of behaviors, but I picked this one just as an example. This was one of the illustrative examples. So don't worry too much about memorizing fixed action pattern, but just understand that this is an innate behavior. So let's look at this. So this type of innate behavior is a sequence. It's unlearned, it just happens naturally, and it's unchangeable, okay? Once it's initiated, it has to be carried out to completion. And it's going to be triggered by something in the environment. So not all innate behaviors fall under a fixed action pattern, okay? Let's look at some examples. This is a quick little video here. So this is a goose, and this is an egg. And when a goose sees a round object outside of its nest, it goes through this fixed action pattern where it takes the egg and it takes the round object and it rolls it towards its body, lifts itself up, and then tucks it underneath and sits on it. Okay, so let's watch this. So there it is. Notice even when the egg is taken away, it continues to do the fixed action pattern. You see that? Okay, so see, it still lifts itself up and tucks itself. So it doesn't stop, right? It's going through this motion. And then even though the round object is not there anymore, it says, oh, a round object, roll, lift up, tuck. Round object, roll, lift up, tuck. So even if that object is gone, it still continues with that motion. Okay, so that's a fixed action pattern. We have fixed action patterns. If you've ever have seen a baby before, and maybe you stuck your finger in their hand, they will grab onto that finger, okay? It doesn't have to be a finger. You could put a pen in there. It could be anything, right? So a little newborn will grab on to a long object. Most likely because it leads to connections between the infant and the parent who would be touching it. They would feel that intimacy and be more connected to their child, okay? They've done this experiment even with a ball. As long as it's a round object, they're going to take it and tuck it under. It doesn't necessarily have to be an egg. Again, they're not thinking about this. This is just a fixed action pattern. It's genetically programmed into their brain. Another fixed action pattern example is with the male stickleback fish. This is a little interesting. So the stimulus for the attack behavior is the red underside of an intruder. So here's what the stickleback fish looks like. And here are some different models that they presented the fish with. It says, when presented with unrealistic models, right? This does not look realistic at all. As long as there's some red, the fish will attack. The fish is attacking these models. It would not attack this one, even though this looks just like a fish and looks like its own species. It doesn't attack because it doesn't have the red belly. So it's attacking anything with the red belly. When it sees the red near its nest, it will attack. It's trying to protect its nest from other males. So these males will actually protect the eggs, not the females in this species, but the males. So the males make a little nest in the water, and then the females will come check out all the nests. And if the female likes this male's nest, she will lay her eggs, and then he can put his sperm on top. This is external fertilization. And then he'll take care of his nest and protect his nest. Okay? So if another male comes near his nest, he's going to attack. Okay? Females don't have the red belly. So here you can see the behavior. A male stickleback fish attacks other male sticklebacks that invade its nesting territory. So again, only the males have the red belly. What's the proximate cause? Remember, this is the how, right? The red belly of the intruding male acts as a sign stimulus that releases aggression in the male stickleback. So that aggression is going to stimulate the attack. Why is this happening? The ultimate reason, by chasing away other male sticklebacks, a male decreases the chance that the eggs laid in his nesting territory will be fertilized by another male. Okay? So he has to protect those eggs so another male does not fertilize those eggs. And then we have a video to show you the attack behavior. This is kind of funny. There's no real audio here. So here are the fish models that they used, okay? So this was a recreation of that experiment that was done with the sticklebacks. All right, so there's the male. You can see his nest, and then they're putting this in the tank. So notice he's not attacking. He's fine with that fish because it doesn't have a red belly. He's just kind of ignoring it. Now remember, the aggression was not released, right? The red belly did not release that aggressive behavior, the aggressive hormones. Now you can see, there he is protecting his nest. Now we got a red belly, bam. Now he's gonna attack. Okay, he does not want that male to be near his eggs, or near his nest, I should say. All right, there's another example. And this is an example of fixed action pattern. Remember, these are innate behaviors. They're genetically programmed. As soon as he sees the red, aggression is stimulated and he'll attack. He went after that one. So that again is fixed action pattern. Let's see here. We already saw this. Imprinting. All right, let's watch this.
This wood duck and her ducklings were filmed in Sun Valley, Idaho. Mother-offspring bonding between wood ducks is a critical cycle. Imprinting is a learned behavior that is limited to a specific time in a young animal's life. Each of the ducklings in the nest jumps down into the water to join its mother's brood because of imprinting. This action doesn't appear to be motivated by any other reason. After the whole brood is together, the ducklings follow the mother closely, learning all the necessary behaviors to ensure their success. Credit National Geographic.
So now we're gonna learn a little bit more, another example. This one's called imprinting. Again, you don't need to worry about that name. You just need to understand that some behaviors are genetically programmed, and that's called innate. So this is another example. Fixed action pattern was one, imprinting is the second. This is a little different because there's some learning and an innate component, where with the fixed action pattern, there was no learning. It was just an external stimulus triggered a sequence of events. For the goose, the round object triggered her to go through the motions of rolling it with her beak, lifting her body and tucking it. With the male stickleback, it was the red belly that triggered the aggressive behavior of attack, attack, attack. So this one has some learning involved in it, and it's irreversible, which is interesting. So it cannot be changed. This type of behavior is going to have a sensitive time period, where in that time period, only certain behaviors can be learned, okay? So let's look at this specific example. This is the young geese that we just saw. Konrad Lorenz did imprinting experiment. It showed that when the baby geese spent the first few hours of their life with him and not their mother, they imprinted on him as their parent. So for that period of time, they followed him around and not another mother, or not the mother goose, because he was the first moving object that they saw, and they spent time with him in the first few hours. So they looked to him to learn how to be a goose, a successful, a successful bird. So let's look at a more, so here's the behavior. The young geese follow and imprint on their mother, okay? The proximate cause during an early critical developmental stage, the first few hours of when they're born, after they hatch out of the egg, I should say, the young geese observe their mother moving away from them and calling. Okay, so that's what's going to trigger them, okay? Moving, something that moves, and something that quacks, okay? If they see something that moves and quacks, they think, there's my mom, I got to follow it. Okay. And in Konrad Lorenz's experiment, he was the moving quacking. He was using a kind of a, I think he might have made the noise himself, or he used a little, horn. What's the ultimate reason? So this is the how, right? Why? On average, geese that follow an imprint on the mother receive more care, because she'll take care of her children, and learn necessary skills. This gives them a greater chance of surviving than those that do not follow their mother. Okay? So let's take a look. This is a pretty interesting one.
For the first 2 years of their life, these chicks will think of him as mother. They'll trust and follow him above all others. It's a process known as imprinting, and it's something that many birds do from the moment they're born. A few hours later, the hatchlings are already following their oversized mother goose wherever he goes.
How cute are they? Aren't they adorable?
Christian's ultimate goal is to film these chicks retracing the great journeys of wild birds from his microlight. It's a huge commitment that will continue long after the filming is over. And it will take months of tender care and devotion before he and his new bird family take to the air.
You gotta love the random little one. Like, oh, okay, I gotta go. That's like my Lily. She's always off doing her own thing. All right, so if you want to watch the whole thing, it's a few hours long, okay? But it's pretty interesting. He kind of jumps into the water and teaches them to look up for predators. He splashes water on his back to teach them to wet their feathers. He shows them how to dip underwater just to make sure all their feathers get wet. So it's pretty interesting, everything he needs to teach them. For 2 years, they're learning everything they need for survival from him, okay? He has to teach them how to fly. It's a very interesting documentary if you wanted to watch it. All right, this is When Imprinting Studies Go Awry. So remember what imprinting is. It's an innate behavior. It's genetically programmed. There's a little bit of a learning period during a critical time in their life. They can learn something and then it can't be changed. Okay, so here you can see that the little gooselings are going to imprint on a moving object the first several hours of their life that is honking and making noises. And they look to that individual, their mother, for skills for survival and for food and things like that, for nutrients. All right. There's also some, does anyone have any questions on the innate behaviors we saw so far? Are innate behaviors making sense? They're, again, genetically programmed. They're not learned. We'll talk about learned behaviors in a little bit. Okay. So we also have some innate movements. Innate movements are going to be when animals move and they're under great genetic influence. Okay. An example of an innate movement is kinesis. Kinesis is a simple change in activity or turning rate in response to a stimulus. So for example, we usually do an animal behavior lab in this chapter where we take little sow bugs. Have you guys ever seen roly-polies before? Okay, they kind of little, if you lift up a rock, they curl up into a circle. So these sow bugs become more active in dry areas and less active in humid areas. So let's take a look. Here's that little sow bug, also called pill bugs. Here's the dry open area. It's going to become more active. Notice it's just random movement. and it's just kind of randomly moving around. And then once it encounters a moist environment, it becomes less active. There's less kinesis. Okay. So we do an experiment where we manipulate the environment of the pill bugs to see if they exhibit kinesis or taxis. There seems to be any rhyme or reason to their movement. Okay. Taxis is a more or less automatic oriented movement toward or away from a stimulus. So with taxis, you can see that some fish are going to be sensitive to currents, and they might move away from the current, like not with the current, so they can capture food. And sometimes they're moving down the current, against the current, so they can lay their eggs, depending on the species, of course. So this is taxis because it's direct movement, or kinesis is just random movement. Okay. And both of these are genetically influenced. Okay? You can have taxis towards a food, taxis away from a predator, for example, those kinds of movements. Wherever you see direct movement, that's taxis. Kinesis would be random movement. And then we have migration. In migration, we have typically, this is genetically programmed in birds. Birds have been one of the major groups that migrate. And the reason why migration is happening is because of the environment. So the weather is getting colder and they have less food. So birds that migrate tend to rely on insects. And in the wintertime, there are no insects, right? Because they're ectotherms. So they're going to migrate to where there are insects. Birds that don't migrate are the seed eaters, like the red cardinals you'll see throughout the wintertime. So if they eat seeds, they tend not to migrate. If they rely on insects as their main diet, like worms and things like that, like the robins, they're going to migrate. Again, it's going to be vital for their reproduction, natural selection, and survival. That's the key to all behaviors. And migration would be in a behavior. So here you can see some migratory birds, and sometimes they do migrate in big groups. It makes it easier for flight if they're in with a big group because they have less air resistance. There was an experiment done with black-capped birds that proved that migration is genetically programmed. And it was pretty interesting what they did. They took these birds and they captured them, and then they marked off where they were trying to fly to. And they would always fly to the same region, the same area. And they looked at the little beak marks where they were hitting. They would hit there and then fall back down and then try to fly again. They were captured in here. And so they were always trying to migrate in that same area. That's how they knew it was genetically programmed. Even when they were translocated, like they were moved to different areas. So they grew up like in Britain or Spain, and then they did an experiment in Germany just to see, and they were programmed to go in that particular region, even when they were moved to another part of the country. So you can see more about that. Animal signals and communication is also an important part of behavior, where animals communicate with other animals. It's the reception of and response to signals. A signal is a behavior that causes a change in another animal's behavior. So for example, we're constantly communicating, right? I'll say something like, raise your hand, and you guys raise your hand, right? So that is a communication. When my signal is my voice, and your behavior is moving your hand or listening and then changing your behavior based on what I say. So animals do this, not just humans. Let's take a look. They can communicate not just through voice and through auditory, but through visuals. Okay, now we do a lot of communication through visual as well. We might not pick up on it. I remember in psychology class, my professor said, we mirror one another. So if you're having a conversation, this is a really interesting experiment that you can try out, okay? So if you eat dinner with your family at a table, or the next time you're sitting and talking to a friend, just do something different. Like maybe lean up like this, and then just wait to see if they do the same thing, right? Because we tend to mirror one another. And then when you're done doing that, don't say anything. See if they do it. And then when you're done, maybe just fold your arms and see if they fold their arms, right? Because it tends to happen. And ever since I've learned that, I've been very conscious of this mirroring. So that is us using our eyes to mirror how to communicate with someone else. Isn't that interesting and fascinating? So try that experiment out. Report back to me tomorrow. See if it works. See if your parents mirror what you do or your peers mirror what you do. And let me know, because I'm always interested in that. So that, again, is visual communication that we're not even aware of. We just kind of pick up on these things. Chemicals are also used. We tend not to have pheromones. Our noses aren't necessarily sensitive to too many things. This is really bizarre. I don't know if you already know this, but females, you can smell other females' menstrual cycle and not even realize that. So when you're living in a dorm with other females, you tend to cycle together. Isn't that bizarre? So bizarre. Again, so you're not realizing that this is happening, and it does take some months to do that. How many people have heard of this before? Have you heard of this before? Okay, so for those of you going to college, just be aware, you're all going to get your periods at the same time eventually if you're living close with other people. What's the ultimate reason for that? Well, if you're all ovulating at the same time, then you have a chance, just like everyone else, to get pregnant, right? So you can have reproductive success. If you're ovulating at different times, then one female might outcompete another female. Does that make sense? So that's the ultimate reason for that behavior. So we actually can smell that, and we don't even realize that. So some of this behavior, it just occurs innately. We're genetically programmed to it. We don't respond to electrical signals that we are aware of. Now, some people do go to, gosh, what are they called? They're kind of like a massage person, but they're like energy people. Have you heard of that before? Like energy work and stuff like that. So there's some people that believe in like energy work. I don't think there's any research yet that kind of supports that, but it would be very interesting because other animals do communicate through electrical signals and energy if we also are sensitive to energy, and we just don't know it yet, right? So some people will go and get energy work done, and it's very interesting. They'll just kind of lay on a table and they just put their hands on there and they just kind of think thoughts. It sounds very bizarre. And then people swear they feel better and more kind of released and happier when they leave these energy sessions. So maybe sharks communicate through electrical signals. Some fish have a lateral line, it's called, and they can detect electrical signals. And that, like a shark, can find you swimming in water because your heart beats, and that emits an electrical signal. Your pacemaker releases an electrical signal to get your heart to beat. So you can't hide from a shark, folks. They'll know where you are. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to do anything about it. They just know that you're there. The type of signal is closely related to the lifestyle and environment of the organism, right? So if they're nocturnal, most mammals, by the way, are nocturnal. We're not. We're diurnal, okay? But most mammals are nocturnal. They're active at night. And that means that most mammals rely on sound and smell. Like our sound and smell is not as great. We rely on our eyes. We rely on visual communication. So that tends to be our strength. But other mammals have better sense of smell than we do, like dogs, for example. They can smell all sorts of things. Okay? They can tell the time of day by smelling, which is really interesting. I remember listening to an NPR report of a woman who worked with dogs. She did research with dogs. And they can determine what time of day it is by the currents and the smells that are released at certain times of day, which is very interesting to me. All right, so chemical communication. Again, these are called pheromones, these molecules that are released. Here's an example of a pheromone. It says when a minnow or catfish is injured, an alarm substance in the fish's skin disperses in the water, inducing a fright response among the fish in the area. So here's an experiment that they did with the minnows. Notice the minnows are swimming great, and then the scientists put a pipette, put a little bit of this alarm substance in the tank. No one was actually injured, they just released it. And notice what the fish did. Within seconds, the alarm substance being introduced, the minnows aggregated near the bottom of the aquarium and reduced their movement. Okay, so that release of that alarm substance entered the other fish. They could pick up on it, they could smell it, and then they huddled together. Why would they do this? Why would they do this? Again, this is when someone gets injured. This is going to be released from a fish. Why would the other fish do this behavior? Emma D.
Because it could be like a predator and they think that they should protect themselves from getting hurt too.
Yes, exactly, because maybe there's a predator. So that's the ultimate reason, right? That's going to lead to their survival. So they can survive if there is a predator around, okay? What I just heard really interesting about this woman is doing research on trees, and she's up in Canada. There's also another scientist, I think it was a Chinese scientist, working on tomatoes. So plants can also release alarm substances that are in the air. And when one tomato plant is injured by like a insect, like a little caterpillar, when it's eating on the leaves, a tomato plant will release a gas into the air, and neighboring tomato plants will then increase certain proteins. They'll make mRNA and make certain proteins to protect themselves from the caterpillar. They make like this little protein that I guess will kill the caterpillar if they eat it, which is really fascinating. So plants can also release these chemicals into the air to communicate as well. Now this is going to focus on animal behavior, but we're now learning more about plant behavior too, which is bizarre because we didn't think plants had communications with one another, but apparently they can. All right, let's see. Research has revealed that environmental conditions modify many of the same behaviors. Okay, so what's this one? Oh yeah, the wasp. All right, let's watch the wasps. Okay.
The Dutch biologist Nico Tinbergen is considered one of the founding fathers of ethology, the study of animal behavior under natural conditions. In his career, Tinbergen studied a variety of animals, including the digger wasp. He wanted to understand how the female digger wasp locates her nest after flying off to collect food. Tinbergen observed that when a digger wasp returns from hunting food, she has no trouble distinguishing her nest from the many others that may be in her neighborhood. Later, when she leaves the nest again, she makes several passes over the nest's entrance. Tinbergen hypothesized that a wasp learns the landmarks around the nest and uses these cues to find the correct nest when she returns with prey. Biologists classify the use of familiar landmarks to navigate as piloting. To test his hypothesis, Tinbergen waited until a wasp entered her nest. Then he created new landmarks by adding a ring of pine cones around the entrance. The wasp left her nest and, as usual, made several passes over the nest's entrance before flying away. Would the wasp notice the change and use characteristics of this artificial environment to find her way back to the nest? To test whether the digger wasp would use the ring of pine cones to navigate back to her nest, Tinbergen moved the ring of pine cones to one side of the nest and observed her behavior when she returned. As we can see, the wasp returned to the ring of cones instead of the nest. We can conclude that digger wasps use characteristics of objects in the environment to navigate back to their nests.
All right, so that's again how animals can use their environment to help them with communication. That was just one example. Now let's focus on learning. That's something we do every day, right? We learn. What is learning? Well, here's the definition of learning. Learning is when you modify your behavior because of a specific experience, okay? So maybe you studied for a test and you did better than you normally would have. So then you've learned, I gotta study for a test, okay? That would just be one example. Maybe you bit into food before and you're like, oh, that tastes disgusting. And then you said, I'm never gonna eat that again, right? That's learning, right? So you modify your behavior because of an experience that you've gone through or you've seen other people go through, right? So Lily, for example, she's my youngest one. She saw Jossie, Jossie would just daydream when she was little. She would take like 3 hours to do 1 page of math. It was so frustrating. My husband was always like, you need to be more patient with her. I was like, I don't know, I just can't take it. He's like, you're a teacher? I'm like, I just can't. She would just take forever. I'm like, come on, you can do this. Go a little faster. And she'd just be like, da 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 da. So Jossie, like, she was that kind of kid. I don't know why, but she just took forever. Now, I think Lily learned from that because Lily was like, wow, mommy and daddy are really like on top of Jocelyn and yelling at her. So Lily does her homework in like 3 seconds, you know? Now, of course, there might be more behind this. Maybe Jossie has a little bit of ADHD. She has trouble focusing. I'm not sure. We never got it checked out because she's fine. She's successful. She just takes a little longer. But I think there definitely is some learning behind Lily trying to get her work done a little faster because she sees the consequences of like all of that negative attention and just doesn't want to deal with that, right? So there's definitely learning happening, not just you, but you can be observing other people, right? Does that make sense? So here is associative learning. Again, you don't need to know any of these specific examples like imprinting or fixed action patterns. These are just given to you so you have a better idea of what I'm talking about. If I just said genetic, you wouldn't really understand, right? So we're just looking at specific examples. So this is called associative learning. Again, you don't need to know that phrase. This is when an animal associates one feature of the environment with another. So let's look at an example. It's also called trial and error. We do a lot of this as humans. Here is, what is this? Does that look like a little coyote to you? I don't know. Little coyote maybe. So here you can see that it found a porcupine. And now it knows I'm not going to play with the porcupine anymore, right? When I see that animal coming up, forget it. Do you see all the quills coming out of its face, right? So that's trial and error. Or a skunk, right? Maybe a little pup wolf or a little pup coyote is playing around and it comes across a skunk and it goes to hit it and it gets sprayed. It's like, oh man, that black and white thing, never touching that again, right? So that's the associative learning that we do a lot as well, okay? Cognition, this is a little bit higher level learning. This is the ability of an animal's nervous system to perceive, store, process, use information gathered by sensory receptors. So problem solving can be learned by observing the behavior of others, okay? So learning not just firsthand, but seeing someone else, okay? It's so important to have, for parents to be good role models because children pick up on parents' behaviors and you're not even realizing that they're listening or that they're picking up, and they're probably not even intentionally learning that, if that makes sense, okay? It's just like that thing with the, menstrual cycle. It's just happening. So children will model their parents, okay? They will look to them for guidance on how to behave. That is cognition, okay? Looking at someone else, oh, this is how I interact with other people. Oh, this is what I do in social gatherings. Oh, this is, this is how I should behave, okay? Again, it might not be something you're intentionally going through, but it just happens, okay? How long is this? 20 seconds. Okay, we can watch this and we'll end here.
Chimps are known for their high level of intelligence among animals. This chimp is using a big piece of wood as a tool to crack open nuts for food. Chimps and humans are believed to represent two branches of anthropoids that evolved from a common ancestor, and molecular evidence suggests that chimps are more closely related to humans than to other apes. Credit National Geographic.
Okay, so we used to think that just humans had cognition, where we would look and learn and have this higher learning. But we are now seeing that other animals can also have cognition, like the chimp, where they're making a tool, right? I need to open this nut. I can't open it myself. Let me get a tool. Let me use a stick or a rock and crack it open. So that's cognition, right? Higher level thinking. We know many other animals have this ability. Dolphins have cognition. Dogs have cognition. Octopus have cognition. It's just very impressive how many other animals have this ability to have this higher level thinking. Okay, so there you can see that. I think this one's a little too long, so we'll stop right here. I don't even know which one this is. Oh, is this the octopus? This is a good one. This is the octopus learning. We'll watch that on another day. We'll watch it tomorrow. So I wanted you to work on the 53 notes. Wait, did I forget to publish this? I think I'm going to make them do tomorrow night. So you have some extra time to get ahead with studying for AP exams. Okay, so I'm trying to be pretty light with homework, where I'm not requiring ecology daily videos. I'm not doing mastering, because I know this is AP testing time and many of you are in other APs. And if you're not, you can use this time to prepare for AP Bio, because the more time you put into it, the better your grade will be. Okay. So yeah, there's at puzzles and things like that. So feel free, if you have extra time, to get ahead on preparing for the AP. But I'll make those due tomorrow night, since we're not quite done 51. Okay, and I do apologize for going out of order. We did 52 first, which was the intro, 51 animal ecology, or also called ethology, and then we'll go into 53, which is population ecology. This is a long one. Okay. If we have a test, it will be the week of May 17th, and it might be another essay just to get you practicing. Maybe some multiple choice just on ecology, just to kind of wrap up this unit. So you have at least one assessment in this unit, okay? Remember, if you are out because of AP testing, this will be a live link every day. I have the video recording of what we go through, so feel free to watch that if you'd like, okay? But it will be here. I usually put this here by the end of the day. Okay. All right. Anyone have any questions?